We will provide whatever guarantee necessary to prove we are not seeking a nuclear bomb.
Representatives from Iran and the United States agree to hold talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. It's been nearly 10 years since Iran signed an agreement to limit its nuclear program in return for sanctions relief and other provisions. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action took effect in January 2016. 2.5 years later, then-President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the deal. Fast forward to today and President Trump's second term in office. In recent weeks, messages and letters were reportedly exchanged between Iran and the United States that led to Saturday's meeting in Oman. CGTN's Ehsan Kavani has more in this report.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says representatives from Iran and the U.S. will participate in mediated discussions in Oman on April 12th. This would be the first diplomatic contact between Tehran and Washington since the recent American administration change. While official statements describe the format as a facilitated dialogue rather than direct negotiations, observers in Iran have confirmed that both governments are sending senior officials to the talks. The Iranian delegation will be headed by the foreign minister, while the American team will be led by the presidential representative for regional affairs. Neither side has disclosed the expected duration of these consultations. Although Tehran's public position maintains these are strictly proximity talks, some analysts suggest that the format could evolve if initial exchanges prove productive. Iran's primary focus in these initial discussions will be assessing Washington's commitment to meaningful engagement. Having faced the Trump administration's abrupt withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear accord, Tehran remains deeply skeptical of U.S. intentions. Ehsan Kavani, CGTN, Yazd.
There is much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Barbara Slavin is a distinguished fellow with the Stimson Center, where she focuses on the Middle East and North Africa. Nabeel Khoury is a former U.S. diplomat. He's currently a non-resident senior fellow with the Arab Center right here in Washington, D.C. Also with us is Hafed Al-Ghwell. He's executive director of the North Africa Initiative at SAIS Foreign Policy Institute. And Mohammad Marandi is a professor of literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Mohammad Marandi, as our reporter just told us, this will be the first diplomatic engagement between the United States and Iran since the new Trump administration took office. Iran has laid out some tough conditions or red lines in the lead up to these talks. It said in a report, according to the Tasnim news agency, that it will not tolerate threatening language from the United States and unreasonable demands concerning its nuclear program. Look, I don't think anybody expects these talks to be easy, but the fact that they are taking place, how significant is that?
It is significant. It's not extraordinary. The Iranians have been carrying out indirect talks for the past few years. For example, during the Vienna negotiations 3 years ago, I was a part of those talks as a media advisor. The indirect talks were extensive. We almost got a deal, but at the last moment, the United States refrained from taking the final step. But this time around, we'll have to see. The Iranians have been tough, as you pointed out. They've said that they will not hold direct negotiations, and that's because of the language and behavior of Trump. And they also said that we will hold the talks in Oman. The Americans wanted a different format, but those were both symbolic but significant, basically sending a message to the United States that if they want any success, a chance for success, they have to respect Iran's sovereignty and they have to change their language and attitude.
Yeah, Mohammed, the Iranian foreign minister talked earlier this week about Iran's objectives in these talks. The foreign minister is Abbas Araghchi. This is some of what he had to say. Let's listen.
Our main goal in these talks is obviously to secure the rights of the Iranian people and to get the sanctions lifted. If the other side genuinely wants to work things out, I believe that goal is within reach. It really doesn't matter whether the talks are direct or indirect. Right now, we prefer to keep them indirect. If the other side shows real intent, we believe a deal can definitely be struck. So as the saying goes, the ball is in the U.S. court. If they show up in Oman with genuine willingness, we'll certainly reach a result.
Simhan, but Iran wants sanctions lifted. What, in your view, is it going to take?
Well, it's going to take a change in attitude in Washington. The rest of his interview, I think, was also important. He said the reason why the talks are indirect is because of the attitude and behavior of the United States. So that really has to change if they want to get anywhere with Iran, especially, to be very blunt, the United States has more than enough trouble on its plate now. It has the trade wars that it's not winning, and it has the Ukraine war not winning either. And in our region, its ally, the Israeli regime, has effectively destroyed U.S. soft power because the region and beyond consider the United States to be complicit. So for the Iranians, what is important is that the United States rethink its policies, but it will still be very difficult for Iran because even if Trump behaves reasonably and he gives, and his representative Witkoff presents acceptable proposals, the very fact that Trump is constantly changing his mind about everything is an added problem. So for me, it's very difficult to see what lies ahead. But the Iranians are showing the international community, the foreign minister, that Iran is more than willing to solve the problem. But for the United States to demand that Iran cut down on its conventional weapons capabilities or its alliances, that's simply not going to happen. And mothballing the Iranian nuclear program, that's not going to happen either.
Right. Barbara, that report that I mentioned earlier on from the Tasnim news agency, it also said that the Iranians want the U.S., as Mohammad Marandi just pointed out, to avoid bringing up issues related to its defense capabilities. And we also heard the Iranian president at the beginning of the program say that Tehran will provide whatever guarantees are necessary to prove that they are not seeking a nuclear bomb. What do you make of that assurance? And these are very nascent talks, or proximity talks as they're being called. Where do you see them heading?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be back with you all. I am cautiously optimistic. I think we've seen some good signaling from the Trump administration that they are interested in an agreement. As Professor Marandi pointed out, the U.S. plate is very full right now, and Trump has not succeeded in getting a ceasefire in Ukraine or a durable ceasefire in Gaza. So the Iranian issue could be low-hanging fruit. After all, we had a deal back in 2015 that Trump withdrew from. So I think there are possibilities here. It remains to be seen what the U.S. demands are going to be, and we have a division, as so often happens in Washington, between hawks and doves. We have some advisors to President Trump who are insisting on dismantling the Iranian nuclear program and addressing the issues of regional alliances and missiles. And then we have Steve Witkoff, who suggests all that Trump wants is assurances, guarantees that Iran won't weaponize, and a focus purely on the nuclear program, but with an allowance for a civilian program to continue. So I'm waiting to see what the U.S. demands are, and then I think we'll have a better sense of whether these talks, whether direct or indirect, have any promise.
Nabeel Khoury, great to have you with us in the studio. There was an opinion piece in the Washington Post, which was written by the Iranian foreign minister, and in that he said President Trump might not like the nuclear deal signed in 2015, but it does contain one vital commitment, that Iran reaffirms that under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop or acquire nuclear weapons. And 10 years later and 7 years after the US unilaterally withdrew from that deal, there is no evidence that Iran ever violated that promise. That's something that's been reaffirmed by US intelligence agencies repeatedly. Does the foreign minister have a point there? Is it a good starting point?
He does have a point, and in a rational world where justice matters, there would be an easy agreement between the US and Iran. But this is not a rational world, and frankly, the administration in the US is not one of the most rational that we've seen in a while. I think the primary achievement of this meeting on Saturday would be to prevent a war from taking place. Mr. Netanyahu has been egging the US for at least 10 years. With the Obama administration, with the Biden administration, he tried hard to get the US to go along with the bombing of Iran. But the US has refrained. It seems that Mr. Trump also is interested in avoiding a war.
Yeah.
Certainly Iran is interested in avoiding a war. I think we can probably say this is going to be the main achievement. To go beyond that and go back to a full agreement, I think partly depends on who is in the US team. We remember that Donald Trump in his first administration went to North Korea and met with the North Korean Kim Jong-un. The talks were not very professional. He said this is a very friendly meeting, on and on. The psychology was right, but in the end, none of the critical issues were resolved or agreed on. So there is a disrespect for the professional in Washington under this administration. If the team includes professionals who really understand nuclear technology and how you can have a peaceful program without going on to a military program, then there is a chance. But if they're going there to posture and to talk about aggression and rocketry and so on, they will broaden the discussion too much, and it would fail.
Hafed, in that same opinion piece in the Washington Post, the foreign minister alluded to, quote, a significant wall of mistrust and doubts about the sincerity of intentions. Let's listen to what President Trump said earlier this week.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
So, Hafed, I don't know whether we could call that a carrot and stick approach, but there was certainly a lot of stick in there. I mean, what do you make of that threat?
First of all, I think Trump, with all of his posturing as a great negotiator, seems to miss a very key issue here in dealing with other cultures, including Iran or even China, is that this kind of bullying only strengthens the resolve of others not to accept anything he does. So he needs to start approaching these complex issues with respect and humility and acceptance of the right of others. Two, as the foreign minister has written, it's correct. Iran has not shown any evidence that it is moving towards a nuclear weapon. It has assured us and the world that it will offer any assurances to calm that. My cynicism tells me that Trump is trying to show that he is offering a last-ditch diplomatic effort. But I think the intention is not to reach an agreement, I'm afraid. I think the intention is to justify any potential military action. But as Barbara correctly said, it all depends on how the United States is going to approach this and what will the United States demand. Will it demand things that it knows ahead of time are not going to be acceptable? Or is it going to show some sincerity in trying to reach an agreement?
Mohammad Marandi, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned on Monday of a forceful retaliation if the Islamic Republic is attacked. Now, for his part, we've been talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. Well, he's no supporter of any kind of rapprochement between Iran and the United States. But what he did say was that if Iran's nuclear installations can be dismantled like they were in Libya, then that would be, in his words, a good thing. Would Iran be open to any sort of US or UN supervision? Because that's what happened in Libya.
No, definitely not. Iran's nuclear program is under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran is a member of the NPT, and Iran will continue to accept this organization, the IAEA, as the authority that supervises the program. But Iran is not going to mothball its program. Iran is not even going to go back to 2015 because Iran has made significant advances on its nuclear program. And that's largely because of Trump himself. In 2015, I was in Vienna for those negotiations. I was a media advisor back then as well. The Iranians gave significant concessions. Iran abided by its commitments for years. When Trump ultimately, Obama, by the way, violated the deal, but then Trump ultimately tore up the deal. After Trump tore up the deal, the Iranians continued to abide by all of their commitments for a full year. And then after a year, Iran began to gradually decrease its commitments until another year. So only after 2 years did Iran restart its nuclear program completely. But the Iranians suffered a lot of damage because of the maximum pressure sanctions. So when the United States under Trump and the subsequent administration, when they impose such damage on the Iranian economy, they can't expect Iran to go back unless they choose to pay reparations for the damage that they did. So it won't be the same 2015 deal as we saw 3 years ago during the negotiations, which almost reached an agreement. 3 years ago, the Iran's advances were recognized. So what we are going to see tomorrow is whether, as your guest pointed out, Trump is sincere about having a deal. If he wants a deal, there is a solution available where Iran's sovereignty is assured and protected. If he doesn't want a deal, then I think it will be, I think that Tucker Carlson's tweet was absolutely correct. And I'm pretty sure that he is in contact with people in military who tell him that this is not going to succeed. It will be devastating for the United States. It will be devastating for the world, but the United States would fail.
All right, let me get Barbara's view on this. Barbara, I just want to get back to something Hafed said a moment ago, and that is that the point of these talks, as far as the United States is concerned, is not to seek an agreement, but to prepare the ground for an attack. And if we look at some of the military movements in the region right now, I mean, the U.S. is pouring troops into the region. It is bombing Ansar Allah, which are more commonly known as the Houthis. The buildup includes combat jets, B-2 bombers, and drones. And according to Global Defense News, Iran has activated its ground-based jamming system. What do you make of it?
Well, it's ominous. It's concerning. I still think that Trump does not want to start another Middle East war. That just it doesn't ring true for me. And if you look at many of the appointments that are being made to this administration, there are people who are much closer to Tucker Carlson's view of the world, which is definitely not to get involved in another Middle East war. And of course, the context with trade wars, with the stock market gyrating, bond prices, et cetera. I don't think that is what is likely. We had a piece on the Stimson Center site saying that if the talks don't succeed, Trump would try to impose more secondary sanctions on countries like China that import Iranian oil, rather than going for a military strike. The way Bibi Netanyahu was treated when he came to Washington does not suggest that the U.S. is on board with military strikes.
Hafed, for all those reasons that Barbara just mentioned, as well as the fact that we heard earlier on from our other guests saying that the United States has its plate pretty full right now, wouldn't that mitigate against any kind of war?
Well, first of all, I mean, Barbara is more capable expert on Iran than I am. But my sense is that if you watch what this administration has done, my only real concern, yes, rationally, everything says it will not want a war. Especially at this time when its failures in Ukraine, in Gaza, everywhere, tariffs, creating enemy blocks around the world. That's the rational explanation. However, Trump is not exactly a very rational person. none of his decisions so far spell a very rational approach to things, whether it's in the tariff area, whether it's the way he's dealing with the Ukraine, with the Europeans, with Canada, with Mexico, with allies around the world. The damage he has created to the credibility of the United States is also a factor. I'm not sure a lot of places around the world, including allies like Europe and Canada, are willing at this time to actually believe Trump when he assures things, let alone somebody like Iran. So, you know, everything says yes, it shouldn't happen. But I don't know, from my watching Trump, I think it's very hard to say that this guy is going to approach things in a very, very rational way.
Nabeel, you were talking earlier on about getting the professionals involved, getting career diplomats involved in this. Well, there was an article published online by Saeed Hussein Mousavian. He is the former chief of Iran's National Foreign Relations Committee, and he laid out something of a roadmap for negotiations. And it goes something like this. First, both sides should draw up lists, one identifying disputed issues prioritized for negotiation, another outlining common interests, and disputes should be resolved based on global norms and the United Nations Charter. Would that work?
In principle, it would work. Again, Mr. Trump himself doesn't know the first thing about the technicalities of these issues. Mr. Witkoff is not actually an expert on these issues either. So it depends if they respect the professionals who are at the State Department, Department of Defense, Intelligence, and bring them along. Then they could get down to some serious discussions. I think that in the end, I mean, Iran is seriously motivated to avoid a war. That's the main thing. Also to avoid further sanctions. Its economy is in a poor condition. And the balance of power in the region the past year and a half has shifted against Iran. An alliance between Israel and the Trump administration has devastated much of the region. And Israel threatens to do more. So I think to avoid that, for these talks to be successful, I think they have to stick to the bare minimum. What does each side really want from the other? Forget the list of 10. Pick the first 2 or 3 top issues that you want and try to achieve them.
Yeah.
And honestly, the road to an agreement with Donald Trump is through his pocket. It's been proven time and again, domestically and internationally. So the Iranians dangling economic opportunity. I mean, the administration has already mentioned this. Trump has already mentioned this. Opening up Iran to American investments. What does this mean? Projects that would be funded, that Trump would and his billionaire friends would benefit from. I think that would be a neat trick for Iran to use to get what it wants.
Yeah. Barbara, I know you wanted to respond to what Hafed was saying, but also I wanted to ask you, you know, diplomats and negotiators often talk about confidence-building measures. Is some of that needed here?
Yeah, what I wanted to add was that we have to factor in the views of the Gulf Arabs, particularly the Saudis. You know, Trump is very close to Mohammed bin Salman, and I think that MBS very much doesn't want a war with Iran, and he will advise Trump also against this. So I think we have to watch that. In terms of confidence-building measures, you know, we should sell those Boeing airplanes we promised to the Iranians back under the JCPOA. Iran needs them. Boeing could use the business. It would be good for our trade deficits. So, you know, I can envision a lot of possibilities, but we have to get through this weekend and see if there's any momentum first.
Okay. Mohammed Marandi, Mousavian also suggested, and we just talked about this a moment ago, that Trump could propose a $4 trillion economic package for Iran during his term in office. He proposes that, well, basically 3 principles moving forward: respecting each other's legitimate interests, containing security military confrontation between Iran and Israel, and creating a cooperative security system among the 8 Gulf nations. Is that something that's doable? What's your view on that?
I think there's a larger problem, and that is that Trump, it is unclear where he stands. It's not just about the fact that he's constantly changing policy and that he's waging one sort of war against the world, and then in particular against the Chinese, and then he's constantly changing his tactics and even his strategy in this trade war. And by the way, what he's done to China has moved China much closer to Iran, and China is definitely going to purchase more oil, regardless of whatever sanctions Trump tries to impose. The relationship between China and Iran is evolving very rapidly right now as we speak. Just as after the Ukraine war, the relationship between Iran and Russia evolved. So Trump has pushed the two countries much closer to each other. But let me give you another example. And I think Dr. Zarif once told me this, although I'm not 100% sure. But after the American and North Korean leaders met, the North Korean foreign minister, I think when he came to Iran, the Iranian officials asked him, how did things go during the negotiations? And he said when Trump was in the room, things were fine. But as soon as he left, Pompeo and Bolton took over, and it was business as usual. Everything fell apart. And that, I think, is another aspect of Trump that makes it very difficult for the Iranians to be able to deal with him, because it's not clear, even if we have an agreement, will he wake up the next morning and post something on the internet undermining the whole deal? After all, Witkoff himself negotiated the deal for a ceasefire, and then literally a couple of weeks later, Trump was saying that Palestinians must be ethnically cleansed, and then we had a restart of the genocidal attack. So there are too many questions right now for the Iranians, and I think the Iranian foreign minister, even though he's very experienced, he's an expert diplomat, and he was very deeply involved with the nuclear file, I think there are lots of questions in his head right now.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.